Afghanistan was recognized as a sovereign country in 1919 after a war with the British. The country subsequently established close ties with its largest neighbor, the Soviet Union. Over the next 5 decades, the USSR's influence in Afghanistan would only grow, with Afghanistan's economy and military becoming dependent on the Soviet Union. Thousands of Afghan soldiers were trained in the USSR, many embracing Marxist ideals. The Democratic Republic of Afghanistan was established on the 28th of April, with Nur Muhammad Taraki becoming its president and Hafizullah Amin prime minister. Taraki's political reforms, most notably the ones regarding education and marriage, horrified conservative rural sensibilities, in turn encouraging resistance on religious grounds. The relationship between Taraki and Amin also began to sour, climaxing in Taraki's assassination in October 1979. Amin set out to undo many of Taraki's reforms, but it was too little too late. The Afghan people still hated him, and the DRA's control of the countryside became nominal or non-existent. Following the assassination of Taraki, the Soviet leadership began viewing Amin as a weak and volatile leader whose days were numbered. They argued that if a radical Islamic regime would come to power in Afghanistan, they would foment unrest in Soviet Central Asia, an area with a considerable Muslim population. On December 12, Brezhnev and his key advisors held a secretive meeting where it was most likely decided to assassinate Amin. The 40th Army was chosen for the invasion of Afghanistan, with General Lieutenant Tukharinov leading it. Advanced divisions of the invading force, under the 40th Army, entered Afghanistan on the 25th, while engineers began building pontoon bridges over the Amu Darya near Termez. This invasion force numbered around 80,000 men. Soviet aircraft of the 105th and 103rd Airborne Divisions also began landing near the border and in Bagram and Kabul. The 108th Motorized Rifle Division crossed the newly built pontoon bridges and started advancing towards Bagram and Kabul through the main roads in the Hindu Kush. At the same time, the 5th Motorized Rifle Division would advance from Kushka in Turkmenistan towards Herat and Kandahar. Amin was elated after hearing that Soviet soldiers had entered the capital. It seemed that his wish had finally come to fruition. Unfortunately for Amin, this story would be one of history's cautionary tales. On the 27th, Soviet special forces captured 12 points of interest in Kabul, major political institutions and communication hubs. Meanwhile, Soviet military advisors sabotaged most of the DRA's military near Kabul. Tanks were left without munitions, soldiers were ordered to check their storage for faulty ammo, and batteries were taken out of vehicles for winter maintenance. In spite of all signs pointing to the contrary, Amin still believed that the Soviets were there to help him. One final attempt to resolve the situation without the use of force was made around noon. Even though the Afghan forces throughout the city were left virtually useless, the Taj Beg Palace was still heavily defended by more than 2,500 soldiers. There were guards in the palace, along with a security cordon around the building and several outposts. An overwatch position was established on a nearby hill, aided by 3 tanks, together with an anti-aircraft division. Additionally, the roads leading to the palace were heavily guarded. The Soviet assault force consisted of at least 648 men, most of them from the Soviet Special Operations Forces, the Spetsnaz, including 520 GRU Spetsnaz, known as the Muslim Battalion, 80 paratroopers from the 9th Company of the 345th Airborne Regiment, as well as 24 Spetsnaz from the KGB Special Unit Zenit, and another 24 Spetsnaz from the elite KGB Special Unit A. Babrek Karmal promised 500 of his own guerrillas for the operation, but only one actually showed up. Soviet paratroopers were also placed further along the roads to the palace to halt any possible reinforcements. Due to the fact that the palace was so well defended, the element of surprise was crucial for the offensive. Therefore, Soviet troops conducted decoy operations on the 25th, 26th, and on the morning of the 27th. The Afghan defenders were told that these were regular training maneuvers, so they lowered their guard. To help maintain the surprise, the Soviet soldiers were also given Afghan military uniforms. The assault on the palace was supposed to happen at 10 p.m. However, due to circumstances within the palace, it was moved to 7:30 p.m. 20 minutes before the assault began, a group of 14 men attacked the hill where the Afghan tanks and air defenses were. Although the Afghans resisted, they were quickly overpowered. Luckily for the Soviets, the crews were too far from the tanks to reach them in time. From that position, Soviet troops even fired several shells towards the palace. The anti-aircraft Shilka systems were also captured and were used to fire during the offensive. The tank positions were supposed to be taken silently, so the fire distraught Colonel Kolesnik, one of the commanders. At 7:15, he gave the order to assault the palace. Operation Storm 333 had begun. The Shilkas were the first to open fire on the palace. 2 other guns fired at Afghan infantry battalions, thus aiding the paratrooper company, which was supposed to capture Afghan outposts. The KGB and GRU Spetsnaz started the direct assault on the palace complex in armored personnel carriers. The first APC passed through the traffic barrier and advanced on the curved road which led to the palace. The road was heavily defended and in the line of fire. However, all other approaches to the palace were turned into minefields. The second APC was quickly disabled by incoming fire and the troops had to abandon it. Many were wounded and the Zenit sub-commander was killed. The vehicles had machine guns on the top, though their fire could only reach the second floor. This left the Afghan soldiers on the third and fourth floor in a substantially more comfortable position. Another APC ran into a brick wall only 20 meters from the palace, and those men were also forced to fight on foot. Several other vehicles were also disabled. At 7:30, loud explosions were heard from Kabul, which confused the Afghan defenders. These explosions took out the wires of the main communication hub in the city, and they were supposed to announce the start of the operation. Soviet engineers, however, failed to start the timer, so the explosion was delayed. All possible Afghan reinforcements were now headed towards the explosion. Most of the Soviet soldiers had managed to get near the palace, but they had forgotten one very important thing. One of the Afghan security posts was not taken out, and those soldiers were free to fire on the assaulting forces from behind. An APC was gunned down near the outpost. This turned out to be a big mistake for the Afghans, as the soldiers inside quickly managed to capture the outpost after leaving the vehicle. Without any fire from the rear or the flanks, the Soviets had an easier time advancing now. Proof of how intensely the defenders fought was the fact that the first Soviet vehicle to reach the palace was from the third column. Those troops quickly left the vehicle, finding cover near the entrance. The rest of the forces were still pinned down by unrelenting fire from the palace. The Spetsnaz commanders saw this as the crucial point of the battle. They decided that they would advance quickly towards the building, straight through the incoming fire. Other Spetsnaz quickly followed, after a machine gun nest had been taken out. At last in position for the final phase of the assault, members of Alpha broke in through the front door, while members of Zenit broke in through a window on the right. Those KGB soldiers were the only Soviet troops entering the building. According to one of the officers, the Muslim battalion was ordered to stay outside. The 24 KGB Spetsnaz now had to deal with Amin's personal bodyguards, numbering about 150. The fighting continued room to room. Amin, aided by his Soviet doctors, had woken up from his coma. He wandered into the palace bar wearing nothing but shorts and a t-shirt. Confused, he asked his men who were the attackers. To the very end, he would not believe that the Soviets were behind it all. Only a few minutes afterwards, Amin was shot down by a Group A officer. Operation Storm 333 finally came to an end. All of the Afghan soldiers were killed or captured, while the Soviets lost 5 KGB and 5 GRU members respectively, along with 2 paratroopers. General Yuri Drozdov arrived at the palace in the morning and made it his headquarters. After being assured that the mission was a success, Babrek Karmal was flown into Kabul to assume his new position as leader of Afghanistan.